What happens when a Hollywood icon known for silence and restraint sits across from a host who never backs down, and the conversation goes somewhere no one planned, live on daytime television. Make sure to subscribe to Talk Show Prime, and like and comment for more talk show coverage. Whoopi leans slightly forward in her chair, glancing at the camera before turning back to Johnny. All right, we're back. Johnny Depp is here with us today. You've been pretty quiet for a long time, especially after everything that's happened, and people are still talking about it. So first, thank you for coming. Johnny gives a small nod, hands folded loosely in his lap. Thank you for having me. Joy shifts in her seat, already half smiling, half studying him. You don't do a lot of these, Johnny. People notice when you choose a place like this. Johnny exhales lightly. Yeah, I figured if I was going to speak at all, it should be somewhere conversations actually happen. The audience murmurs softly, a few claps ripple through. Sunny tilts her head. When you say conversations, what do you mean by that? Johnny looks at Sunny, then back to Whoopi. I mean places where disagreement isn't a crime. Where people can say what they think, even if it's uncomfortable. Joy lets out a short laugh. Oh, trust me, disagreement is not an issue here. The audience laughs louder this time. Whoopi raises a hand. All right. Let's keep it moving. Whoopi continues. You've been painted in a lot of different ways over the years. Monster, victim, liar, icon. How does it feel hearing people still argue about you when you're not in the room? Johnny pauses longer than expected. The room gets quiet. It's strange, he says slowly, because most of the arguments aren't really about me. They're about what people want me to represent. Joy jumps in quickly. But you do understand, Johnny, that for a lot of women watching, this isn't theoretical. They see powerful men escape consequences all the time. A few audience members clap. Johnny nods, acknowledging it. I understand that perspective, he says calmly. I really do. But I also understand what it feels like to be spoken about as if you're not human. As if your life is a headline, not something you actually lived. Joy's smile tightens. But Johnny, public figures don't get to opt out of accountability just because it's uncomfortable. Johnny looks directly at her now. I never asked to opt out of accountability. Sunny leans forward. Then what are you asking for? I'm asking for fairness, Johnny replies. And I'm asking people to listen when facts don't match the narrative they prefer. The audience reacts, some clapping, some murmuring disagreement. Joy shakes her head slightly. See, this is where I struggle. Because when men talk about fairness, it often comes at the expense of believing women. Johnny's jaw tightens just a bit. With respect, Joy, believing women shouldn't require disbelieving men by default. The room stiffens. Whoopi looks between them. Okay, let's slow down for a second. Joy turns toward Whoopi. But that's the reality, Whoopi. Historically, women weren't believed. Ever. Johnny nods again. And that's wrong. Completely wrong. But replacing one injustice with another doesn't fix the problem. A louder reaction from the audience this time. Some applause, some audible groans. Sunny interjects. But Johnny, people feel you benefited from a system that already favored you. Johnny shifts in his seat. If that system favored me, I wouldn't have spent years watching my name become a punchline while staying silent. Joy leans forward now, elbows on the table. Silent by choice, Johnny. You chose silence. Johnny meets her gaze. No, I chose restraint. Joy scoffs lightly. That sounds like spin. A few gasps from the audience. Whoopi raises an eyebrow. Joy. I'm serious, Joy continues. You had money, lawyers, platforms. A lot of people don't. Johnny's voice remains steady, but firmer. Money doesn't buy peace. And it doesn't buy the truth sticking. The audience claps again, louder. Joy shakes her head. But it buys influence. Johnny responds immediately. And yet here I am, years later, still defending myself. Whoopi steps in. Let's bring this back. Johnny, when you hear Joy say that, what goes through your mind? Johnny pauses, choosing his words. I think it's easier to talk about systems than about individuals. Systems are abstract. Individuals are messy. Joy crosses her arms. So now you're saying criticism of you is just abstraction? No, Johnny replies. I'm saying when people stop seeing you as a person, empathy disappears. Sunny looks thoughtful. Do you think empathy disappeared for you? Johnny nods once. Very early on. Joy responds quickly. Empathy disappears for women all the time, Johnny. All the time. Johnny doesn't interrupt. He lets her finish. And, Joy continues, when a woman speaks up, she's called dramatic, manipulative, or worse. Johnny leans forward slightly. And when a man denies an accusation, he's called a monster before he opens his mouth. The audience reaction is mixed and loud. Whoopi raises her hand again. All right. We're not doing a shouting match. Joy sighs, shaking her head. I'm not shouting. I'm frustrated. Johnny looks at her. So am I. That lands heavily. The room goes quiet for a beat. Whoopi breaks it gently. This is obviously emotional for everyone. Johnny, did you expect this kind of pushback today? Johnny gives a small, almost tired smile. I'd be surprised if there wasn't. Joy lifts her eyebrows. So you came ready. Johnny looks straight at her. I came honest. The audience claps again, sustained this time. Joy tilts her head. Honest about everything. Johnny nods. As much as I'm allowed to be in a room where people already made up their minds. Joy opens her mouth to respond, then pauses. Whoopi watches them both carefully. Okay, we're going to take a quick breath here, because when we come back, I want to talk about accountability, responsibility, and whether redemption is even possible in the public eye. The audience applauds as the tension lingers, Joy and Johnny still locked in a look that suggests this conversation is far from over. The applause fades, and as the show returns from the break, the energy in the room feels heavier, tighter. The audience settles back into their seats, but there's still a low buzz, like everyone knows something uncomfortable is about to continue. Whoopi looks straight into the camera. All right, we're back. Things got a little heated before the break, which honestly isn't unusual around this table. John is still with us, and we were talking about accountability, public judgment, and whether people ever get a fair shot at being heard. She turns to Johnny. You said something right before we went to break about people already making up their minds. I want you to explain that. Johnny nods slowly. Sure. What I meant is, when a narrative forms, it becomes safer for people to stick with it than to question it. Questioning it can make you unpopular. And I learned very quickly how fast silence gets interpreted as guilt. Joy exhales sharply. Or as avoidance. Johnny turns toward her, unflinching. Or as survival. The audience reacts, a mix of claps and murmurs. Sonny jumps in. But Johnny, you weren't silent forever. You eventually went to court. You spoke. Yes, Johnny replies. But by then, the story was already written. I was just a character in it. Joy shakes her head. You're still not acknowledging power. That's my issue. You had the resources to fight back in ways most people don't. Johnny nods. That's true. And I don't deny that. But power doesn't stop reputational damage. It doesn't stop people from looking at your kids differently. It doesn't stop strangers from deciding who you are. A murmur runs through the audience at the mention of his children. Joy leans back slightly. But Johnny, there are women watching who lost everything by speaking up. Jobs, reputations, safety. Johnny responds immediately, and that's tragic. And wrong. And they deserve better. Joy raises an eyebrow. But, Johnny continues, not raising his voice. That doesn't mean the answer is to abandon the idea of due process entirely. The audience reacts again, louder now. Whoopi lifts a hand. Okay, hold on. She turns to Joy. Let him finish. Johnny takes a breath. What scares me isn't being criticized. It's how quickly people decided that questioning an accusation was immoral. Joy scoffs softly. Because for centuries, questioning women was the default. Johnny nods. And that was injustice. But justice shouldn't swing like a pendulum that just hits someone else. The audience breaks into applause, louder than before. Joy presses her lips together, clearly holding back a response. Sonny looks thoughtful. Do you think the culture went too far? Johnny chooses his words carefully. I think fear replaced conversation. Joy finally jumps in. Or accountability replaced excuses. Johnny looks at her steadily. Accountability requires evidence. A sharp intake of breath ripples through the audience. Whoopi leans forward. All right. Let's talk about evidence then. She looks at Johnny. People say you were only believed because a jury said so. Johnny nods. And I'm grateful they listened. Joy shakes her head. But juries get it wrong all the time. Johnny responds calmly. So do mobs. That lands hard. The audience reacts with a wave of clapping and a few audible gasps. Joy leans forward now, voice firmer. Are you calling people who supported your ex a mob? Johnny doesn't hesitate. I'm saying when people stop listening and start chanting, it stops being justice. Sunny interjects quickly. But Johnny, don't you see how that sounds dismissive to survivors? Johnny turns to Sunny. I see how it sounds. And I hate that it sounds that way. But acknowledging one person's pain shouldn't erase another's humanity. Joy shakes her head again. You keep centering yourself. Johnny responds, slightly firmer now. Because I'm talking about my life. The audience reacts again, split but engaged. Whoopi watches the exchange closely. Joy, what do you want him to say? Joy pauses, then says, I want him to admit that he benefited from doubt that women don't get. Johnny considers that. I benefited from doubt eventually. After years. Joy counters. Years where you still had fans, money, and support. Johnny's tone tightens just a bit. Fans aren't protection. And money doesn't insulate you from being hated. Joy raises her voice slightly. But it insulates you from consequences. Johnny responds without raising his voice. No, it insulates you from poverty. The audience reacts strongly. Applause breaks out, louder and more sustained. Whoopi steps in again. All right, we're not turning this into a shouting match. Joy exhales, shaking her head. I just think there's a lack of acknowledgement here. Johnny looks at her. I've acknowledged pain. I just won't accept guilt for something I didn't do. That sentence hangs in the air. The audience goes quiet for a moment. Sunny breaks the silence. Johnny, do you think there's anything you would have done differently? Johnny nods slowly. I would have spoken sooner. Not to defend myself loudly, but to remind people I'm human. Joy looks at him skeptically. You think that would have changed anything? Johnny shrugs slightly. Maybe not. But silence lets others speak for you. The audience murmurs in agreement. Whoopi looks at the camera briefly, then back to the table. This is clearly hitting nerves on both sides. She turns to Joy. Do you think there's any version of this where Johnny could have come out without criticism? Joy shakes her head. No. And that's part of being a public figure. Johnny nods. I agree. Criticism is fair. Dehumanization isn't. Joy responds quickly. People didn't dehumanize you. They criticized your actions. Johnny leans forward slightly. When you're called names, mocked, erased from work, and spoken about as if you're incapable of truth, that feels like dehumanization. The audience applauds again, some standing claps mixed in. Joy looks momentarily taken aback by the reaction, then regains her composure. Well, we clearly disagree. Johnny gives a small nod. That's okay. Joy tilts her head. Is it? Johnny looks at her directly. It has to be. The room feels charged. Whoopi glances at the clock. We're going to keep this conversation going after the break. She looks at Johnny, then Joy. Because this isn't just about Johnny Depp. It's about how we decide who deserves to be heard. The audience applauds as the camera pulls back slightly, Joy still visibly frustrated, Johnny calm but clearly emotionally invested, and the tension unresolved as the show heads into another break. The music fades again, and when the camera comes back up, the atmosphere is noticeably more intense. The audience applause is shorter this time, more restrained, like people are bracing themselves. Joy takes a sip of water. Sunny sits upright with her notes in hand, and Whoopi exhales slowly before speaking. Whoopi looks around the table. Okay, we're back. And clearly this conversation has struck a nerve, not just here, but probably at home too. She turns to Johnny. Before the break, you said something important, that criticism is fair, but dehumanization isn't. I want to dig into that, because that's where things really split. Johnny nods. Yeah, because criticism assumes you're still a person who can respond. Dehumanization assumes you're already guilty, already disposable. Joy jumps in immediately. But Johnny, when people criticize public figures, especially powerful men, they are responding to patterns, not just personalities. Johnny turns to her. And that's where individuals get lost. Joy shakes her head. No, that's where accountability finally shows up. The audience reacts with scattered applause. Sunny leans forward. Johnny, do you understand why people don't separate the individual from the system? Because systems protect individuals like you. Johnny listens, then answers calmly. I understand the argument. I just don't agree that flattening people into symbols creates justice. Joy lets out a short, humorless laugh. So now you're the one being flattened. Johnny meets her gaze. For a long time, yes. A ripple of murmurs runs through the crowd. Joy responds sharply. That sounds incredibly self-pitying. Johnny doesn't flinch. It sounds honest. The audience reacts strongly. Applause breaks out, mixed with audible disagreement. Whoopi raises her hand. Hold on. Joy, let him speak. Then you can respond. Johnny takes a breath. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm saying there's a difference between being held accountable and being erased. Joy folds her arms. Erased? You're sitting on national television right now. Johnny nods. After years of being unhireable, mocked, and treated like a punchline. Joy responds quickly. That happens to women too. Johnny answers just as fast. Yes, it does. And it shouldn't. The audience claps louder this time. Sunny interjects. But Johnny, people feel that when men like you talk about unfair treatment, it overshadows women who never get this platform. Johnny turns to Sunny. I didn't create the imbalance. I'm just living inside it. Joy shakes her head again. But you benefit from it. Johnny leans forward slightly. Only after surviving it. The audience reacts with a wave of applause, louder and more sustained than before. Joy's tone sharpens. You keep framing yourself as someone who endured something uniquely cruel. Johnny responds, voice steady but firmer. No, I'm saying cruelty isn't exclusive. There's a brief silence. That line lands. Whoopi looks between them. Joy, you've been very clear about your frustration. What's the part of Johnny's response that bothers you the most? Joy pauses, then speaks slowly. What bothers me is that every time we get close to acknowledging women's fear, it shifts back to how hard it was for him. Johnny listens without interrupting. And, Joy continues, that's the pattern. Men take up the oxygen. Johnny waits a beat, then replies. I'm responding to questions asked about my life. Joy fires back. But you're shaping the narrative. Johnny finally shows a crack of emotion. Because for years, I wasn't allowed to. The audience gasps slightly, then applause follows. Sunny looks thoughtful. Johnny, do you think there's a way to talk about your experience without undermining others? Johnny nods. Absolutely. But that requires people to believe two truths can exist at once. Joy scoffs. That sounds nice in theory. Johnny turns to her. Why not in practice? Joy leans forward. Because historically, when it comes down to it, women lose. Johnny replies immediately. And when assumptions replace evidence, everyone loses. The audience reacts loudly again, clapping and murmuring. Whoopi steps in. Okay, let's pause right there. She turns to Johnny. You've been very measured today, but I want to ask you something directly. Are you angry? Johnny thinks for a moment. I was. For a long time. Joy interjects. At who? Johnny looks at her. At the silence. At the speed with which people turned away. At myself, for thinking staying quiet was noble. The room quiets. Sunny asks softly, do you still feel that anger? Johnny shakes his head. No. Now I feel clarity. Joy raises an eyebrow. Clarity about what? Johnny looks straight at her. About who listens and who doesn't. The audience lets out a collective "oh," followed by applause. Joy stiffens. Are you saying I'm not listening? Johnny responds evenly. I'm saying you're listening to respond, not to understand. That line hits hard. The audience reaction is immediate, loud applause, some standing, some gasps. Whoopi widens her eyes slightly. All right, okay. Joy shakes her head, visibly irritated. That's not fair. Johnny replies calmly. It's how it feels from this side. Joy raises her voice slightly. You don't get to lecture me on listening. Johnny keeps his voice level. Then don't lecture me on my life. The audience erupts, applause, gasps, a few cheers. Whoopi quickly raises both hands. All right. All right. She laughs nervously. We're gonna need security to relax, okay. The tension lingers, but there's also a strange stillness now, like something has shifted. Whoopi looks at Joy. Joy, do you want to respond? Joy takes a breath, clearly restraining herself. I think Johnny is very good at sounding reasonable. Johnny nods slightly. I'll take that as a compliment. The audience laughs and applauds. Joy continues. But sounding reasonable doesn't mean you're right. Johnny responds. And being loud doesn't mean you're correct. Another wave of applause rolls through the studio. Sunny glances at Whoopi. This is intense. Whoopi nods. Yeah, it is. She looks at Johnny. When you agreed to come on this show, did you expect this level of confrontation? Johnny smiles faintly. I expected honesty. This qualifies. Joy lets out a dry laugh. Well, at least we agree on something. Johnny nods. Finally. The audience laughs, breaking the tension just slightly. Whoopi looks at the camera. We're going to take one last break. When we come back, we'll talk about what happens after moments like this, how the internet reacts, how careers change, and whether conversations like this actually move anything forward. The applause starts again, louder and more chaotic than before. As Joy stares straight ahead, Johnny sits back in his chair, and the energy in the room suggests the biggest moment is still coming. The camera comes back up for the final time, and the applause is loud but uneven, like the audience doesn't quite know whether to clap out of excitement or nerves. Some people are standing, others are whispering to each other. Joy adjusts her glasses. Johnny sits still, hands folded, expression calm but alert. Whoopi waits for the room to settle before speaking. All right, Whoopi says slowly, we're back. And if you're just joining us, you picked one heck of a moment. A few nervous laughs ripple through the crowd. Whoopi looks at Johnny. We've talked about accountability, public judgment, anger, listening. I want to end this part of the conversation by asking something simple. What do you want people to take away from this? Johnny nods, taking a breath. That conversations don't have to end in agreement to be meaningful. And that disagreement doesn't make someone evil. Joy lets out a quiet scoff. That sounds very neat. Johnny turns to her. It's not neat. It's necessary. The audience murmurs in approval. Sunny leans in. Johnny, do you think today helped you? Or hurt you? Johnny thinks for a moment. I don't measure it that way anymore. Joy raises an eyebrow. Must be nice. Johnny responds calmly. It's survival. The audience reacts again, applause, a few gasps. Whoopi steps in quickly. Joy, before we wrap, I want to give you space. You've clearly had strong feelings today. Joy straightens in her chair. I do. And I'll be honest. I still don't agree with Johnny on a lot of this. Johnny nods. I wouldn't expect you to. Joy continues. But I think moments like this show exactly why these conversations are so hard. Because everyone comes in carrying their own history. Johnny looks at her. That's the first thing you've said today that I completely agree with. The audience laughs and applauds. Joy pauses, then gives a tight smile. Don't get comfortable. More laughter. Sunny smiles slightly. I will say this, people watching at home are definitely reacting. Whoopi nods. Oh, they're reacting. She looks at the camera. Our producers are already telling us social media is lighting up. The audience buzzes louder at that. Whoopi turns back to Johnny. You've been trending since the first segment. Johnny chuckles softly. That was fast. Joy adds, people don't waste time anymore. Whoopi continues. Some people are praising you for staying calm. Others think you dodged responsibility. Some think Joy went too far. Some think she didn't go far enough. Joy shrugs. That sounds about right. Johnny nods. That's the internet. Sunny asks, does that still affect you? Johnny answers honestly. Less than it used to. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't sting. Joy looks at him for a moment, then says, that's probably the most human thing you've said today. The audience reacts warmly, clapping. Johnny smiles faintly. I'll take that too. Whoopi leans back in her chair. After this show ends, clips will go everywhere. Headlines will pick sides. People will decide who won. She pauses. Johnny, do you care about that? Johnny shakes his head. No. I care about whether someone watching felt less alone. That line lands hard. The audience applause is loud and sustained. Joy crosses her arms, then uncrosses them. I don't think anyone won today. Johnny nods. I agree. Sunny adds, but something definitely happened. Whoopi smiles knowingly. Yeah, it did. She looks at Johnny. After today, are you done talking again? Or are you more open now? Johnny considers it. I'm open to real conversations, not performances. Joy smirks slightly. Good luck with that. The audience laughs. Whoopi glances toward the stage manager, then back to the table. We're almost out of time. She turns to Johnny. I appreciate you sitting through this. Not everyone would. Johnny nods. I knew what I was walking into. Joy adds quietly, and you walked right back. Johnny looks at her. Because walking away doesn't change anything. The audience applauds again. Whoopi stands slightly from her chair. All right. That's all the time we have today. She looks into the camera. After the show wrapped, our audience stayed buzzing. Some people applauded Johnny as he left the stage. Others shook their heads. Backstage, there were tense conversations, a few awkward silences, and a lot of producers staring at their phones. The audience chuckles softly. Within minutes, Whoopi continues. Clips were everywhere. Johnny Depp versus Joy Behar started trending. Comment sections split right down the middle. Some called it brave. Some called it uncomfortable. Some called it necessary. Joy nods. That sounds familiar. Johnny smiles slightly. Very. Whoopi finishes. And whether you agreed or not, one thing was clear. People watched. People felt something. And people are still talking. She turns back to Johnny. Thank you for coming. Johnny nods. Thank you for letting it be real. Joy adds, even if I didn't like parts of it. Johnny looks at her. That's honesty. Joy exhales, then gives a small nod. Whoopi looks into the camera one last time. All right, everyone. That's our show. The audience applauds loudly as the camera pulls back, Joy still thoughtful, Sunny quietly talking to Whoopi, and Johnny standing up, acknowledging the crowd with a brief nod before walking off stage. And now it's your turn. Share your opinion in the comments and subscribe to Talk Show Prime for more real talk show stories.